Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Next 2.0 on WQLN PBS NPR. Next is produced by the Public's Voice Media. I am your host, Marcus Atkinson. If you want to know more about Next 2.0, you can go to Facebook and like our page. You can also go to Instagram and follow us there at Next 2.0 Erie. And there you can keep up with upcoming show promos and events and clips about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Thank you so much for tuning in. Lots to catch up on here, folks. First of all, let me give you some personal and background information. I am a member of the NABJ, the National Association for Black Journalists. Many of you never heard about that organization, never knew it existed. July 31st, which is just the other day from when I'm taping this right now, America got a feel for who this organization is because they hosted Donald J. Trump for an interview on the first day of their national convention in Chicago, Illinois. Now, Donald J. Trump was invited. Vice-President Kamala Harris was invited. They were both supposed to be there to kind of give their platform, field questions about their vision for America. Vice-President Kamala Harris could not make it because she was attending the funeral for Democratic Rep. Sheila Jackson Lee of Texas, who died recently. She was 74 years old. She died recently of cancer. And Vice President Harris wanted to be there to show her respects and give her condolences. She did offer to appear via Zoom or digitally, and that was declined. Don't know why it was declined. Don't know if I would have made that decision, but that's the decision that was made. Let me give you my opinion first of whether or not the former president should have been invited to speak at the NABJ convention, because that's a very controversial thing. I don't know why. Because it is the National Association for Black Journalists, journalists being the key word. And they actually had to issue a statement stating their reasons for inviting Donald J. Trump, justifying it. You had the person that did all the arrangements within the organization for the convention step down because it was so much controversy. Let me say this as your host and as a member of that organization. It is completely justified for the presidential nominee, the official nominee of the GOP party, to be invited to the national convention for Black journalists. Journalism is what they do. It's what we do. It's at the epicenter of the mission. And to give you a feel for who's in the audience, you have everyone from your Marcus Atkinsons of Next on WQLN, NPR, PBS, all the way up to the Don Lemons, and everything in between. So it's the upstarts, it's the somewhat established, it's the uber established. It doesn't matter for those of us that take to the microphone to try to inform people in the name of news to varying degrees, because mine is more topical. These are the people that are at this convention. And ironically, I was supposed to be there and I ran into a scheduling conflict, couldn't make it. I digress. I really wish I would have made the time to make this particular convention. But my opinion is it is 1,000% justified. He should have been invited. Now, I get the controversy. The catch-22 is he has utilized various platforms to say disparaging and insulting remarks about the vice president, about Barack Obama in the past, who's our 44th president of the United States, and about a whole host of Black and brown folks. I see how a lot of people didn't want to utilize our platform at the convention to give him an opportunity to say more of the same. But I say it's a catch-22 because that's exactly what it is. He should have been invited. And so he was on stage with three moderators. One of those moderators was ABC reporter Rachel Scott. Rachel goes in, and to be clear, Rachel fires off the first line of questioning that I, as a host, would repeat in some form or fashion, almost verbatim. Because in my opinion, she went right after the question that I think any Black journalist, show host, reporter, or what have you would have and should have asked. Let me play the clip and then we'll debrief it.
I want to start by addressing the elephant in the room, sir. A lot of people did not think it was appropriate for you to be here today. You have pushed false claims about some of your rivals, from Nikki Haley to former President Barack Obama, saying that they were not born in the United States, which is not true. You have told 4 congresswomen of color who were American citizens to go back to where they came from. You have used words like animal and rabid to describe black district attorneys. You've attacked black journalists, calling them a loser, saying the questions that they ask are, quote, stupid and racist. You've had dinner with a white supremacist at your Mar-a-Lago resort. So my question, sir, now that you are asking black supporters to vote for you, why should black voters trust you after you have used language like that?
So there's the question. And again, I think it was completely justified. There's not a thing she asked in that question that I wouldn't have went after, because I think it's fair. You put it out there, you do it, you say it, answer for it when you get an opportunity to answer for it. This is the audience. It's an audience full of black folk who are involved in journalism from various aspects. You should expect this. And yet this was Donald J. Trump's response. We'll unpack why I believe he responded the way that he did, outside of the fact that he knew what she was saying was correct and it was a justified question. I think there was another motive to his response. Take a listen.
Well, first of all, I don't think I've ever been asked a question so in such a horrible manner. First question. You don't even say, hello, how are you? Are you with ABC? Because I think they're a fake news network, a terrible network.
And so ABC is fake news now, he says to Rachel Scott, the ABC reporter, by no coincidence. Well, what's his issue with ABC? You remember the September 10th debate that he's backing out of, that he's backpedaling on, and all of a sudden he doesn't want to do it because in his mind, at least this is what he's saying, the Democrats haven't had an opportunity via their convention to choose their proper candidate. Things could change, and until that decision is made officially and ratified at the convention, we are not going to commit to anything. Now, you do understand that Vice-President Kamala Harris has received all of the key endorsements of every major figurehead within the Democratic Party, to include the sitting president, Joe Biden, the former president and his first lady, Barack and Michelle Obama, the Clintons, and a list of others. She's also acquired the proper delegates to be the presumptive nominee. And so, yes, we understand that the convention has to come about. There has to be an official coronation of her as the candidate. But for all intents and purposes, she's already there. Is it an excuse? Probably. Where was that debate set to be scheduled? On ABC, the fake news network. Is this not the same Donald J. Trump that's trying to have the debate moved to somewhere that is more Trump friendly? And everybody knows what that network is, that being Fox News. I'm not saying that disparagingly, that it isn't an opinion. When you look at Fox News, they have paid out millions of dollars for espousing false rhetoric during the Trump campaign when he was claiming that the election was stolen. Millions of dollars. And so now they make an attempt to be more bipartisan, but everyone knows, for the most part, Fox News and the Fox News channel and network is in Trump's corner. That's where he's trying to have it move. But for right now, it is at ABC. And so there was something strategic about his response, which is why so many people were pushing back about Donald Trump being on our convention itinerary in the first place, because they knew he would try to utilize it to fit his own specific purposes. But that's what candidates do. Again, I don't think that's justification to not invite the GOP nomination. But it goes further as you let this interview play out with these 3 black women on stage. I have said on my show, The Briefing Room, that I produce on the Public's Voice platform, that this rhetoric that he is accustomed to utilizing is going to backfire. That's my prediction. I want you all to write it down. It's going to backfire. Not just him, the networks that follow him, the pundits that are in support of him, the candidates that run alongside of him, the language that they've utilized, this bullying rhetoric, this demeaning rhetoric, this disrespectful rhetoric, the things that have become commonplace under Donald J. Trump. This rhetoric is going to be the death of them, because now you have an image that does not take too kindly to being attacked, disrespected, and put down, especially in the public sector. Add to that, that this is the demographic that in the African-American community is the engine behind so much movement and activity in terms of getting things done. You don't believe that? Push up to your average black church in any city that you live in. Go through the yellow pages and choose one. And I guarantee you will see who the soldiers of that congregation is. Pay close attention to who the workers are. Pay close attention to how things get done. Pay close attention to who's in the pews. Black women have been the backbone of so much activity within the African American community all the way back to slavery days. And so I said on that other network, in the briefing room, that this would backfire. Let me go into the next line of questioning based upon something that he says. This next statement is so ridiculous that it underscores how foot-and-mouth disease is going to potentially catch up with this candidate this time around. Here's his next statement, and then we'll debrief a little something about this take. Take a listen.
I've known her a long time indirectly, not directly very much, and she was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always
But you know
identified
what?
as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn, and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe that
I think
she is
somebody should look into that too when you ask.
Before I even go into my response, let me play you the response of Karine Jean-Pierre, who was the White House press secretary, who, if you didn't know, is a black woman. Take a listen.
As a person of color, as a black woman who is in this position that is standing before you at this podium behind this lectern, what he just said, what you just read out to me, is repulsive, it's insulting, and you know, no one has any right to tell someone who they are, how they identify. That is no one's right. It is someone's own decisions. She is the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. We have to put some respect on her name, period.
Let me quote the end of that statement because it is certainly worthy of that. She is the Vice President of the United States, and we need to put some respect on her name, period, end quote. You hear the neighborhood come out of that press secretary at the end of the statement? This is why I said that the manner in which Donald J. Trump has become accustomed to speaking about candidates and people in general, especially in the public forum, is not going to set so well in this election cycle. The image of Kamala Harris and the demographic from which she comes, that being black women, educated black women, are not going to take so kindly to you saying and doing the things that you've done in the past. But now let's go into your attack of her not being quote unquote black, which is the most ridiculous statement. I take that back. It is not the most ridiculous statement I've ever heard from Donald Trump, but it certainly is not only highly offensive, but ill-advised. And it just shows how tone deaf this candidate and those around him are. I understand that there are certain things that have been thrust to the foreground, to the forefront in this cycle that mainstream America didn't pay attention to. I started the show talking about my membership to the NABJ, which I believe mainstream America knew nothing about until this recent situation in Chicago. Also talk often about HBCUs, historical black colleges and universities. And now we're starting to hear more talk about the Divine Nine, these historically black fraternities and sororities. I am the president of the Erie, PA chapter of 100 Black Men of America. And if you look at the membership ranks of that organization, you will find by the thousands members from these Divine Nine organizations. Historically speaking, Dr. King was an Alpha, Alpha Phi Alpha, the brother fraternity of the sorority that Kamala Harris belongs to, the AKAs. Coretta Scott King was an AKA. This organization goes back a long time, and these are all 99.99.99%, because I think there's a handful of white folks sprinkled in there. But these are black sororities and fraternities. And so why pledge at an HBCU, which was Howard University, which is where Vice President Kamala Harris went? why pledge at this all-black college to this all-black sisterhood if you don't have a sense of your blackness, if you don't identify with being black? If you don't know much about the AK sorority, let me give you a feel for some of the members of this organization that you may have heard of. I already told you about Coretta Scott King. Did you know that Maya Angelou was an AKA? That Ava DuVernay is an AKA? That Star Jones is an AKA? Alicia Keys, Toni Morrison, the great writer, the singer Brandy Norwood, the actress Holly Robinson Peete, Felicia Rashad from Cosby Show acclaim is also a member. Roxy Rooker, you may know her as the neighbor from the Jeffersons. Helen Willis, she's an AKA. Jada Pinkett Smith, AKA. Wanda Sykes, Lynn Whitfield, Rosa Parks was an AKA. Mae Jemison, first sister to go into outer space. Mae Jemison, I'm sorry. First sister to go into outer space. She's an AKA. And the list goes on. So obviously, at the very least, these comments are ignorant, stupid, if you will, and uninformed. To question the ethnicity of Kamala Harris and how she operates within that ethnicity is just plain silly when you look at her background and her history. This interview, gives you a chance to peek into the mind of Donald J. Trump. And not that we haven't had that opportunity in the past, because there's a lot of clips, a lot of videos, a lot of news reports where he runs off at the mouth and you kind of get it. But recently, it appears that he's been kind of snatching the cover off of how he really feels. His rhetoric has gotten stronger and I believe more honest, because he wants to underscore to his base, not necessarily to all Americans, to his base, how important it is for him to get back into office so that they can be put in check and they can understand that this is the America that we want and it reflects the America that used to be. That's my opinion. This next line of questioning teases out how that applies to law enforcement. The shootings of unarmed black folk at the hands of law enforcement has been the bane of our existence as African Americans in recent years. The George Floyd situation just brought it all to the forefront, but since the days of Rodney King, and even before, the Rodney King tape was just one of the first that was caught on video. But now, especially since everybody has a phone, there's surveillance equipment all over the place, law enforcement has body cameras, the footage just keeps piling up, and this latest account with Sonia Massey is heavy on our hearts right now. This next question goes into that, and they question something that he said in the past. Take a listen and then we'll debrief it.
So Sonia Massey, someone from Illinois, an unarmed black woman, was shot the other day in her home by a deputy sheriff. The deputy has since been charged with murder. You've said police would get immunity from prosecution if you win. Why should someone like that officer have immunity?
All right, so here's where we need to pay very close attention, because now he's starting to go into this territory where he is pandering to the Blue Lives Matter movement. He's also pandering to people that he knows make up a large part of his base that are big on Back the Blue. And we are advocates for an appreciation and respect for law enforcement here on Next 2.0, 1,000,000,000%. But you and I both know that that has been hijacked and held hostage by the racial divisiveness that has engulfed our country right now. So it's not just as simple as the police need to be respected. The police also need to be held accountable. And I think we all agree with that. But it's been so politicized in a racial manner that we find ourselves fighting over it. He's pandering to one side of that particular argument. Listen to his response to that question.
But I'm saying if I felt, or if a group of people would feel that somebody was being unfairly prosecuted because the person did a good job maybe with crime or made a mistake, an innocent mistake. There's a big difference between being a bad person and making an innocent mistake. But if somebody made an innocent mistake, I would want to help that person.
What would those exceptions be? What would determine an innocent mistake?
You go after somebody and it's a very close call and it's very dangerous. And you know, they have... The policeman's life and woman is a very difficult thing because sometimes you have less than a second to make a, life and death decision. And sometimes very bad decisions are made. They're not made from an evil standpoint, but they're made from the standpoint of they made a mistake.
All right, so we need to pay very close attention to the language that he's using in this response. He's saying things like split-second decision, very close call, these decisions not being evil, they just made a mistake. He's talking about these shootings of these unarmed black people. Go back to the Rodney King case, none of those guys were convicted, all of them were acquitted. But in recent history, a good number of these police officers have either been convicted or let go. Every now and then someone gets off, but they've just gotten into this pattern of making people pay a price for these quote unquote split-second decisions. I have often made reference to the shooting of Walter Scott in South Carolina at the hands of Officer Michael Slager, who's now serving 20 plus years. And his split-second decision was caught on tape. And the minute this man started running, he drew his firearm, shot him in the back, immediately gets on his radio, makes up a lie as to how it all played out. I want you to not just think about some of these shootings that you've read about, that you've seen on the news. I want you to go back and do your homework on how some of these quote unquote split-second decisions played out. And I think you'll get an understanding that the law enforcement officers that were prosecuted and or let go should have been. I think it's in the greatest support to law enforcement to weed out the people that give that profession a bad name, because obviously we need the police, but we are not protecting, not as a unit, not as an organization, not as a society. We are not protecting the worst element because they make it hard for everyone. And when you look at this Sonia Massey case, everything involving that whole incident, again, I'm throwing up air quotes, it's absolutely ridiculous. She calls them to the house because she thinks there's some sort of prowler in the area. And in the process, she ends up being shot in the face. And you wonder why African Americans, black folk, don't like to call the police, even when it's about something that benefits them. Because when law enforcement shows up on the scene, people start to feel like it's a crapshoot if you're black, and they shouldn't have to feel that way. So he's saying this as if his judgment isn't questionable, first of all. Second of all, as pointed out earlier, he's pandering to a certain demographic who, even when law enforcement runs rogue, they agree with the actions if they're taken against people of color or marginalized backgrounds. Now, the next line of questioning, it challenges that. And so you talk about, well, I should be able to, he says anyways, I should be able to come in and be a judge. If this thing is close, I should be able to come in and help them. Well, how is his judgment in these situations? The January 6 riots strikes at the heart of what he thinks and how he feels when it comes to this particular topic. And it challenges his notion of supporting law enforcement. Listen to this next question, and we'll debrief that along with his response.
You've called yourself the candidate of law and order. Yeah. When Time Magazine asked you if you would consider pardoning all the rioters, you said, yes, absolutely. Sure. You called them patriots. 140 police officers were assaulted that day. Their injuries included broken bones, at least one officer lost an eye, one had 2 cracked ribs, 2 smashed spinal discs, another had a stroke. Were the people who assaulted those 140 officers, including those I just mentioned, patriots who deserve pardons?
Now, before I even play Donald Trump's response, I really want you as a listener to think about this. The fact that this type of question is even necessary for someone who is attempting to ascend to the highest office in our country. The mere fact that you even have to ask this of someone after witnessing the greatest act of treason this country's ever seen since the Civil War is an issue. And yet the question has been posed. What's more problematic is his response. Take a listen.
Would you pardon
What's
those
going to
people?
happen? Oh, absolutely, I would.
You would pardon those?
If they're innocent, I would pardon them.
They've been convicted.
And by the way, the Supreme Court just well, they were convicted by a very a very tough system. How come the people that tried to burn down Minneapolis, how come the people that took over a large percentage of Seattle, how come nothing happened to them? How come the people
But sir, we're talking about people that were seen beating
We're
officers
talking
with
about federal
flagpoles,
buildings.
dragging them down the stairs. They're on video. Have you seen that video, sir?
Oh, really? Well,
You would pardon those rioters?
They shot a young lady in the face who was protesting. They shot her in the face. You know, nobody died that day. You do know that. But people died in Seattle.
All right, am I the only one who sees that he's trying to justify their actions on January 6th? Am I the only one who noticed that when he said, if they're innocent, and she quickly chimes in with a rebuttal, if they're innocent, no, they were convicted, and he went right into being defensive. Well, they were convicted by a rough system. It always comes down to, if it doesn't happen the way he wants it, that benefits him, it's an issue. I lost the election. It isn't fair. I'm going to fight it. They were convicted. Well, the system was rough. This is who he is, and this is how he thinks. And so he is bending over backwards, the impressment of his actions and his words, to try to figure out a way to say what they did was okay. Once again, he's pandering. I want to refer to a New York Times article, which was published on January 5th by Chris Cameron. I want to recap this article because he gives us context for these deaths and explanations so that we can take what Donald Trump is saying and really try to make sense of it. He says in this article that Ashley Babbitt, an Air Force veteran, was fatally shot by a Capitol Police officer as rioters tried to breach the House chamber. Kevin D. Greeson died of a heart attack, collapsing on the sidewalk west of the Capitol on January 6. Roseanne Boylan appeared to have been crushed in a stampede of fellow rioters as they surged against the police. Benjamin Phillips, the founder of a pro-Trump website called Trumparoo, died of a stroke, and now he gives further context. It says Mr. Greeson and Mr. Phillips died of natural causes, the Washington Medical Examiner said in April. He added that Miss Boylan's death was caused by an accidental overdose. In the days and weeks after the riot, 5 police officers who had served at the Capitol on January 6 died. Officer Brian D. Sicknick of Capitol Police was also attacked by the mob, died on January 7th. Officer Jeffrey Smith of the Metropolitan Police Department killed himself after the attack. Officer Howard S. Liebengood of the Capitol Police also died by suicide 4 days afterwards. The Capitol Police had previously said that Officer Sicknick died from injuries sustained while physically engaging with protesters. The Washington Medical Examiner later ruled that he had died of natural causes, multiple strokes that occurred hours after Officer Sicknick's confrontation with the mob. The Medical Examiner added, however, that all that transpired played a role in his condition. Later, a bipartisan Senate report released in June found that the 7 deaths were connected to the Capitol attack, but the report was issued a month before 2 Metropolitan Police officers, Gunther Hishida and Kyle DeFreytag, died by suicide in July. The police agencies have not classified the 4 total suicides as line-of-duty deaths that will provide the victims' families with enhanced benefits. Washington law excludes suicide deaths from the line-of-duty designation. In all, about 150 officers from the Capitol Police, the Metropolitan Police Department, and local agencies were injured, and hundreds of workers were traumatized by the mob. And so that was the article from the New York Times, again written by Chris Cameron, published on January 5th, 2022. So does it matter to those families, is what I'm asking you, is what I would ask President Trump, former President Trump. Does it matter whether these people were directly killed by rioters, shot, beaten, maimed, whatever? Does it matter to the families how they were killed? Do you mean to tell me that those that committed suicide because of this altercation, because of this riot, trying to protect the nation's capital now, I want you to get that, the nation's capital, that those that committed suicide after being a part of this, those deaths aren't attributed to those rioters? Is that what you're trying to say to me? You think that's what the family would agree with? So when it's all said and done, this was just a dumpster fire, at least in my opinion. I encourage you to go online, look the interview up, listen for yourself, get a feel for everything that he's saying. It's classic Donald Trump. If anything, in my opinion, it's more brazen than what it's been. Why do I say that? Because you took these thoughts and opinions to a venue full of black journalists at an event that is focused on black journalists. And it just says to me, as a black podcaster, radio host, and lightweight journalist, that these thoughts and opinions are deeply rooted in his heart and completely ingrained into the fabric of who he is as a person. And that's troubling, considering that he wants to run the country once again. I'm going to end it there, but there's so much to look forward to with this 2024 election. We still have Vice-President Harris choosing her potential vice president. That announcement should be coming up soon. As a matter of fact, when we record our next installment of Next, we should have that name, and that will be a part of the discussion. And so stay tuned, stay involved, stay engaged. There's certainly a lot going on, and I think now more than ever, it is paramount that we not only stay informed, but we have to cast a vote and make our voices heard in this particular election. And so that's it for our show today. You can tune in next time for more discussion and analysis with local and national guests. Remember, the Next 2.0 streams on Fridays on all major podcast platforms and the fourth Sunday of the month at 4 p.m. on WQLN PBS NPR, which is 91.3 FM. And remember, if you want to leave a message, comment, or suggestion, you can call the Next hotline at 814-240-8816. We look forward to hearing from you. I am Marcus Atkinson. Come and join us again so that you can hear about what's next for our communities and our democracy. Peace.